this is in the very concerning category for me, because I can see a real danger here where people are in a male prison for sexual offences, including rape, and they basically go, hey, I'm a woman, which gets them out of a male prison where they might be having a rough time anyway, and gets them into a prison full of women who are their primary target.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, that's the main issue, really, with self-identification, which is the new law that potentially could be coming through Parliament. I mean, at the moment, there is a safeguard where a transgender person will have to prove that they're transgender by at least living for 2 years, say, as a woman, and having a doctor's diagnosis. A study that I've just done recently is looking at how many prisoners there are and how many are in male prisons, how many in female prisons. And I've found about 13 in female prisons already, but there are 100 in male prisons living as women, but they will immediately be able to transfer into female prisons when...
So hang on, there's a couple of examples here. A transgender rapist who was moved to a women-only jail, despite still having male genitalia, was segregated after making unwanted sexual advances on female inmates. We have a male transgender prisoner guilty of a brutal murder moved from a women's jail because he kept having intercourse with female inmates. There are, it seems, examples of where people are being moved and then pose a threat. This is the point, isn't it? Pose a threat to the women in prison.
Yep. Already it's possible to do that, but it will only ever get worse when it becomes easier for people to transfer.
And just explain then this law that is going through Parliament, because your organisation is all about having a look at how this impacts women, isn't it?
Yeah. So we're against the self-identification of gender, which is the new law that is being proposed to go through. So there's a consultation at the moment.
So you don't want people just to be able to tick a box saying, I am now a woman?
At the moment, to get a gender recognition certificate, you need to have lived as a woman for 2 years and have a doctor's diagnosis. So
I've got great concerns myself that this law is called the Gender Recognition Act. It is due reform, and there are important things that do need to be changed. But even as a transgender person, and I have to say that I am probably in the minority with this view. I share some of the concerns that the other speaker this morning has. But we should remember that transgender women are women, they're not men. But it comes down to that genuine aspect. And we live in a world, and I'm grateful for this as well, that if you go to prison and you have a medical condition, you get treatment. If you have a heart disease, if you have cancer, you still get treated. And thank God for that indeed. So I think the genuine transgender prisoners do need help. We don't want people committing suicide because it's a very serious business. One in two transgender people contemplate suicide at some time in their life. However, I have immense sympathy when it comes down to sex offenders being transferred who are not going down the traditional transitioning route. For me, it comes down to the doctors and the psychologists. At the moment, the traditional route for transitioning, it's really tough. All this nonsense that's been in the papers over the last year or so about kids being fast-tracked on some sex change conveyor belt going into hospital as Bob and coming out as Barbara is absolute rubbish. You ask any transsexual woman, getting help medically on the NHS is incredibly difficult. It takes years, 3, 4, 5-year waiting lists. So that is an absolute nonsense. Personally, I think all these safeguards and the vetting that goes on are essential. I have big concerns about people simply ticking a box, and I think we're placing an awful lot of trust on the doctors and the psychologists to get it right. And I would hate for the prison system to be intimidated by the current mood that we're terrified to talk about gender because gender has become extremely incendiary, and I think people are tiptoeing around the subject. I agree with that.
Should basically it be barred for anybody to actually begin proper transitioning from male to female or female to male until they've at least gone through puberty? And the reason that the panel were arguing, I think, was anyone who's had kids know they go through all sorts of weird phases. You know, but actually, until they've gone through puberty, are they in any kind of position, really, to know exactly what they want? And if you've already started, particularly the physical transitioning, it can cause all sorts of problems down the line. What do you think?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, my view is on that. You know, we would probably disagree here, Piers. I think you know, just as you were a boy from the day, you know, day one, you never doubted it. Transgender people know from an early age who they are. If you allow puberty to actually kick in, then you end up growing bigger. You end up growing hairier. And if you're going from male to female, obviously that is going to make your transition a heck of a lot more difficult. And all that happens in that situation with the children, they give you puberty blockers. So basically, it's like a pause button on the old video record machines. Nothing permanent happens. You just pause the development.
I think it's not true to say that we know that this is safe.
That programme as well.
Hang on a second, Nicola.
Okay. Puberty blockers have never been used in children to stop natural puberty, and so we don't know what effect that will be. And social transition, which is where a child changes the way they dress, and they'll be referred to as a different name, say as a boy. Psychologically, that will have an impact. So if you've got a 4-year-old that likes to play with trucks,
I'm sorry. This is somebody with no gender issues whatsoever
stereotypes as well.
About something they know, which is very similar to the Question Time programme. 4 people around the table talking about transgender and not a single transgender person there. Now, if you had a table of white people talking about black issues and what it meant to be black, would that be permissible?
You don't have to be transgender to have views on children transitioning and the risks to women or children.
Probably all you've read in the Daily Mail.
Over 80% of children that begin to have questions about their gender, they change their mind before puberty. So we need to let the children go through puberty. We need to let the children go through puberty to be able to understand what they actually are.
It's now 2017, and historically, since the 1950s to the present day, the actual suicide rate among transgender people has been terrible. Thankfully, now, when people have the confidence to come out and be brave and speak up and be strong in who they are, that is gradually declining.